Step into the darkness where reality blurs and nightmares come alive. It started innocently enough. A gentle knock on the door in the dead of night, barely audible over the howling wind outside. I hesitated, glancing nervously at the clock on the wall. It was past midnight, and I wasn't expecting any visitors. Curiosity getting the better of me, I made my way to the door and peered through the peephole, expecting to see a neighbor in need or perhaps a lost traveler seeking shelter from the storm. But what I saw chilled me to the bone. Standing on my doorstep were two children, their faces shrouded in darkness, their eyes nothing but gaping voids of blackness. I recoiled in horror, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled backward, struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. I must be dreaming, I thought to myself, pinching my arm in a futile attempt to wake myself up. But the pain was all too real, and when I opened my eyes, the children were still there, their empty gazes fixed on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Please," one of them whispered, their voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "Let us in." I wanted to slam the door shut and pretend that none of this was happening, but something held me back, a nagging sense of guilt, perhaps, or maybe just morbid curiosity. Whatever it was, I found myself reaching for the doorknob, my hand trembling as I prepared to invite the children inside. But before I could act, a sudden sense of dread washed over me, freezing me in place as I realized the gravity of the situation. These children were not what they seemed, and if I let them in, God only knew what horrors would be unleashed upon my home. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I took a step back from the door and spoke in a voice that betrayed my fear. "I'm sorry," I said, my words barely more than a whisper. "But I can't help you. You need to leave." For a moment, the children stood silent, their dark eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. And then, without a word, they turned and vanished into the night, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the lingering sense of unease that hung in the air like a heavy fog. I didn't sleep a wink that night, my mind consumed with thoughts of those children in the darkness that seemed to emanate from their very beings. I tried to tell myself that it was just a trick of the mind, a figment of my imagination brought on by exhaustion and stress, but deep down, I knew better. The next day dawned bright and clear, the storm clouds of the night before nothing more than a distant memory. But despite the sunshine and blue skies, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me like a pall. I tried to go about my day as usual, but everywhere I went, I felt as though I was being watched, by unseen eyes that followed my every move with a sense of malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. As the days turned into weeks, the encounters with the children became more frequent, their empty stares haunting my every waking moment. No matter where I went or what I did, they were always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to let down my guard. I tried to ignore them, to pretend that they didn't exist, but it was no use. The darkness that surrounded them seemed to seep into every aspect of my life, poisoning my thoughts and filling me with a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. And then, one night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep for fear of what lurked in the darkness beyond my bedroom door, I heard it, the gentle tap-tap-tapping of tiny fingers against the window pane. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I listened to the sound growing louder and louder, until it was all I could hear. With trembling hands, I reached for the curtains and slowly pulled them back, revealing the two children standing outside, their empty eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "Please," they whispered, their voices barely more than a breath on the wind. "Let us in." But this time, I knew better. With a newfound sense of resolve, I shook my head and backed away from the window, refusing to give in to the darkness that threatened to consume me. And as I watched the children fade into the night, their anguished cries echoing in my ears, I knew that I had made the right choice. For I had seen firsthand the true nature of the darkness that lurked within them, and I knew that to let them in would be to invite untold horrors into my home. From that day forward, I lived in fear of the children at the door, never knowing when they would return to torment me once again. But no matter how many times they knocked, no matter how loudly they begged, I refused to give in to their sinister demands, determined to hold fast against the darkness that threatened to consume me. For I knew that to let them in would be to seal my fate, to become ensnared in a web of terror from which there could be no escape. And so, I stood firm against the darkness, a lone beacon of light in a world consumed by shadows, knowing that as long as I refused to let them in, I would remain free from their curse forevermore.